Everybody. We're going to be reading two pieces of literature today. We're going to be reading a poem and also reading prose, which is a story. And we're going to talk about the different characters in both selections. So first you're going to read to understand what the text says, like we do in class, and then you're going to read to compare and contrast the features of the text. So remember that the poems are structured very differently than a story that you would read in a book. So let's look at the first text. It's on page 328. It's called Angie's Solo. I'm going to read that to you guys. It says, follow along on page 328. My sister Angie's Glee Club was about to perform for their annual show, and the auditorium was packed. I was incredibly nervous because Angie would be singing her first solo in front of an audience, and I really wanted her to do well. At last, the Glee Club members filed on stage and began singing the first song on the program. Too soon it came time for Angie to sing. Although she seemed tense and was probably trembling inside, I could tell Angie put her heart into it and sang away. But I also knew what she sounded like when she practiced, and tonight's performance was far from perfect. In fact, Angie sounded flat several times. Still, the crowd started cheering even before she had finished. I almost dreaded seeing Angie after the show. Should I be honest about her performance? After all, I knew Angie was extremely sensitive and hated any form of criticism. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so what should I tell her? Brian, she called when she saw me. What do you think of my solo? I didn't hesitate for a moment. It was really beautiful. You should be proud of yourself, I replied. When I saw her beaming, I knew at that moment how right I was to think that the truth is sometimes wrong. All right, so that was our prose. Now this is our poem. It's called At the Concert by Lars Gary. When my sister sang her solo, I thought it sounded awfully flat, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I could hardly tell her that. So later when she asked me what I thought about her song, I told her it was beautiful because that night the truth felt wrong. So when we're talking about these two different types of literature, we're going to be looking on page 329 and comparing and contrasting them by using a chart. So the first thing that I ask you to do is to think. It says complete the chart below by writing X's in the boxes next to the details that appear in the poem, the prose, or both. Some details may have been used in both. So the first one, it says the night of his sister's solo, the setting. Now that setting was the same in the poem and in the prose. So you're going to put an X for the poem and an X for the prose, okay? The next one says dialogue. Dialogue between two characters. And remember, dialogue is when two characters are speaking to each other. And that was shown only in prose. And remember, when you have dialogue, you have to have the little quotation marks that we talk about in class. That was only seen in prose. So you're going to put an X for prose for that one. The next one is rhyming words that help describe events. The rhyming words were only found in the poem. So we had rhyming words like flat and that at the concert, and we also had song and wrong as rhyming words as well. The ideas grouped in stanzas. Now you should know that stanzas are only used in poems. So we have stanzas only in our poem for this one, so our X should be for poem. And thoughts and feelings of the narrator, that is shown in the poem and in their prose, so you should have an X for both of those. Ideas grouped as paragraphs. Paragraphs are only used in prose, so you should have an X for the prose one for that one. Now, on number 2, and I'll put a picture of that in our Google Classroom so you can copy that down and make sure you have X's in the correct boxes. Number 2 says, what are 2 details you learn about the sisters' performance in both the story and the poem? So some examples of different details you learn about in the performance is that the sister's solo sounded kind of flat. So that could be a poem or a detail you might write down. And the narrator also did not want to hurt the sister's feelings. So the narrator actually told her something that wasn't true to make her feel better. So those are different details. And you don't have to use those details. You can use other details as well. All right, continuing onto page 334. You're going to do a short response. Comparing and contrasting the different ways the story and the poem describe the same event, including text evidence in your response, okay? So you're going to do that, complete that on your own, and then tomorrow we're going to be looking at a different set of 2 pieces of literature to compare and contrast those, okay? Miss you guys, finish those up, and I will come back and see you tomorrow. Thanks.